Hiya, I'm Helen Webster from Anglia Ruskin University, and I applied over the summer for Senior Fellowship of the Higher Education Academy via the direct route to the HEA. I hope you're really enjoying the conference, and I'm sorry I can't be with you. I'm actually at my sister's wedding in Holland at the moment, and I really wanted to contribute to this session because I found it a really valuable exercise to apply for the HEA. So I said I would do this short video to share my experiences with you, and I hope you find them useful. I've been wanting to go for HEA Fellowship for ages and just not really got around to it because it's a hard thing to do without institutional support. And I already had a PG cert in higher education, which I'd done at Cardiff, in 2000. But at that point, of course, the HEA didn't exist, and subsequently Cardiff didn't have that course accredited, so I couldn't claim fellowship straight through the PG cert. So I had to go via the direct route. And what really prompted me to pull my finger out and start working on it was when I applied for the job at Anglia Ruskin. It was one of the criteria for the candidate because they wanted someone to help them set up their accredited program and act as mentor and assessor for other people's claims. So they really needed someone who had this. So that was a real kick in the pants to get my application done. So I applied via the direct route and went for Senior Fellowship, which I wouldn't have been able to do through the PG Cert accreditation, and had to write quite a bit actually. It's about up to 7,000 words, so you do your reflective account of practice, which is a sort of reflective commentary of your career to date, focusing particularly on the last sort of 5 years or so, and 2 case studies, sort of unpicking your practice in a bit more detail, and then of course your 2 supporting statements from people who know your work. So there was quite a bit of work involved in that. I think deciding for which level to go for was one of the trickiest bits for me because I figured I would just go for fellowship. I didn't feel particularly senior. I didn't think that I would be a good candidate for senior fellowship. So I just assumed I'd go for the standard level, and it was a conversation with someone who was mentoring me that made me go for senior. She said, "Don't be ridiculous. You've got 5 or more years full-time experience doing this sort of work in higher education, and you've had an impact on other people's practice as opposed to just your own." And we talked about the description that makes the difference between a fellow and a senior fellow. Being successful coordination, support, supervision, management and or mentoring of others. And having a think about that, I thought, well, my role hasn't been senior enough for me to really have much management experience. And she said, well, management isn't the point. Have you had any impact on other people? And I thought, actually, informally, yes, I probably have. It's easier than I thought to find things that I could put down as a learning developer. Things like, I'm sure many of us work with staff and faculties to try and get our provision embedded in what they do, or to help to comment on their provision, trying to work at their own resources, or commenting on policies institution-wide. There's also informal things that weren't part of my job description that I hadn't really thought of. Things like I'm a member of the ALDinHE CPD working group, which is partly why I'm giving this presentation today, so that would go on the list. Things like the 10 Days of Twitter course that I ran for ALDinHE last year, that again is evidence of mentoring colleagues and working with them. So actually in hindsight there were loads of things that I had completely underestimated that made me think, yes, maybe I'll go for Senior Fellowship. The other thing that really gave me confidence was actually seeing a colleague, Jeanette Myers, who very kindly lent me her application and let me see exactly how she'd phrased and positioned things. That gave me a role model that made me think, actually, yes, I can do this as well. This is possible. It's not that a lowly learning developer isn't somebody who could be a senior fellow. So that definitely had an impact on my decision to go for senior as well. I think the descriptors that most of us as learning developers are going to find it hard to evidence are A1, so designing programs of study. Yes, I think we've all had experience designing one-off workshops, but programs of study is not something really we do because we're not faculty lecturers. We don't have modules in that sense. But I was able to talk about the fact that I had worked with colleagues and faculties to help them design their modules, which again is evidence for senior fellowship, and to embed and integrate my own provision into their faculty teaching, into their modules where possible. I talked about the fact that I had designed and delivered a series of workshops on study skills in the library context. So that actually there was stuff there that, although it didn't look like traditional programs of study, you could certainly express in that way. The next one is A3, to assess and give feedback. And again, of course, we don't formally do any marking, but we work with feedback and assessment all the time. So I was able to stress things like I would run workshops and one-to-one sessions helping students to understand assessment criteria and boost their assessment literacies. I was able in one-to-one sessions to do a lot of diagnostic work with students to assess what level they were at, what they needed and what they weren't understanding. That in my workshops I work an awful lot with informal formative feedback and peer feedback, that kind of thing. And that of course for us interpreting the feedback and assessment criteria of our faculty colleagues is the bread and butter of what we do. So actually again, although it doesn't take the traditional expected form, there's an awful lot there that we can talk about as learning developers for A3. The other one that strangely I struggled with a bit was the core knowledge descriptor 1, which is the subject knowledge, because I thought, well, my subject knowledge, I'm not a subject lecturer anymore. My subject knowledge is in fact learning and teaching, which is precisely what the whole application's about. So I had to be really, really explicit about how I used my knowledge about learning and teaching from my PGCE and so on, and from my own reading and other professional development in my work. And it felt a bit stating the obvious, but I think it's important to bring out. So what advice do I have for someone making their application? I've read quite a few now. I've written my own, of course, and had that accepted. And I've been working as a mentor and assessor on ARU's own accredited scheme. So I've learned quite a bit, I think, about what to do and what not to do. And the first thing that I realised, I think, was that I wasn't sure what genre this was. It's not an essay. It's not a case study. It's not a reflective learning journal. It's not a job application, but it's got elements of all of those things in. So it is a kind of blend. And I learned to stop worrying about whether I was writing it in the right way, because it's its own sort of thing. And as long as I was evidencing what I needed to, there's actually quite a lot of leeway in how you write it. It's important not just to be narrative, not just to tell the story of what happened, and to make sure that you are being reflective. So you are showing the underlying rationale, your reasoning for why you did what you did, drawing on your experience and drawing also on your expertise from any PG certs you might have done, or any literature that you might have read, any training that you've done. It's important to demonstrate the evidence for the impact that you're claiming. So how do you know things were successful? So you can show that you know about evaluation methods. So it's got both reflection and evidence in it. And there's a real focus on you. This is a reflective thing. So no passive voice, which was quite hard for me. I had to write I, first person. And even in things where it was a team effort, I still had to pull out what I contributed to that and talk about that. So I really had to be careful to make sure that I was foregrounding myself in that, which felt a little bit uncomfortable. But the main thing that struck me, and just talking through that now, is this is all stuff that we tell students to do. And I've heard that a lot from lecturers who are putting their applications in. God, I tell students to do that all the time, and here's me doing exactly the same thing. This is something that we're very, very used to doing. So I think learning developers have a real advantage in writing their claims, because we're used to helping students pull all these things out too. So I think when you're writing your application, when you're structuring your paragraphs, making sure that you pull out the main point. So what is this example about? What's the theme that it demonstrates? What point am I making? Why is this an issue? Why did it happen? What was my approach to resolving that issue? Why did I take that approach? And what was the impact on my students? What was the impact on me? What was the impact on my colleagues and the profession more broadly? So trying to pull those things out made quite a nice structure for me to follow in my paragraphs, I think. Finally, I just wanted to encourage you to find people who can support you in doing your application. So find someone who can act as a buddy, who can go through the process with you, and you can encourage each other and support each other. And I'd like to thank Emma Coonan, who's at UEA, for being my HEA buddy. Find someone who's a role model to you, somebody who has perhaps recently been through the process at the same level that you're aiming for, who can talk to you about how it was for them, and perhaps even show you their application as a model. And thanks again to Jeanette Myers for showing me hers. And somebody who can really mentor you, someone senior, perhaps somebody who knows the HEA and how it works fairly well and is used to perhaps reading applications like this, who can help you to express things and pull things out in the right way. And I'd really like to thank Professor Sally Brown for doing that for me. And of course, the more support your institution can give you, if your manager's behind you, if your institution supports HEA Fellowship, then so much the better. And thanks to Anglia Ruskin University for supporting me through the process and making sure that I got through.